Hello folks, BuildBrew.com here, bringing you the second part of the video reviews for the latest set of the Gatewatch. This time around I would be talking about constructed implications. In part 1 I've been covering the general limited environment, and now it's time to talk about impact on standard and modern primarily. Basically, while I already touched this topic in the text reviews, which will be linked in the description below, I think Kalitas Trader of Get is an overhyped card, and it will be having a really hard time to find proper use for it. The card is powerful, but I think it's pretty hard to find a good use for it. Chandra Flame Color is a bit disappointing, but it could have been worse. I think it will find some play, perhaps in the sideboard of the Red-Green Eldrazi ramp deck. Nissa Voice of Zendikar is also tricky. The bad part is that, unlike the 3-mana Nissa, which is not currently utilized that much, this new Nissa cannot be flipped from Galactic Company, so this diminishes the value out of it. The card itself is much more powerful and I think much better than Chandra as a card, and I think Nissa will probably be utilized in a new archetype, some kind of red-green beatdown deck with Eldrazi's and maybe Science. Anyways, it will be this not so hyper-aggressive, more of a mid-rangey type of deck. I don't think it will be very Storm tokens oriented. Cards which really would make a huge impact, I think, will be Sphinx of Final Word. That's the 7-mana 5/5 flyer with Hexproof, which can be countered, and then instants and sorceries you cast can be countered by spells or abilities. He will be probably a solid one-off in the control decks in the sideboard. Lindvala the Preserver will also probably be in the sideboards of Jeskai and Esper to combat Abzan and all those mid-rangey beatdown decks. It might be a good one for Abzan as well in the sideboard to have a good play in the mirror match. It dies to ultimate price, but because Eldrazi ramp archetype received so much of support from the new set, I actually think that ultimate price will even be less played, although it's still best card to combat Jace and cards like that, Tasigur, and some creatures from Abzan, so it still will be played, but its value going down even further. And Lindvala will benefit from that, even though there is the new Combust sort of removal. The 1 in red, deal 5 to a flyer, can't be countered. But because apart from Lindvala, there are very few things that matter so much. Okay, there is Mantis Rider, of course, and Wind Matrock, but Rending Volley covers that and a bunch of other things on top of that. Rending Volley also kills Ojutai, the Dragon Lord, as does the new 2-mana removal. So it will be an interesting dynamic to see which one will actually be more relevant in the new metagame with the new set in Standard. Clash of Tentacles is, I think, a card that we will probably see in the blue-green Eldrazi ramp decks. Sylvan Advocate is something tricky. I really hope that it will see competitive play, and it has chances to do so. That's the 2-mana Elf Druid Ally, 2/3 Vigilance, as long as you have 6 or more lands. this guy and all your land creatures get +2/+2. In the text review, I've been actually considering a funky new deck for standard featuring this guy, Ojutai's Command, Bring to Light, the legendary blue-white Merfolk, which animates your lands, those sorts of things. So this kind of a funky mid-range combo deck that can provide huge punches out of nowhere. Not a big fan of offs, although I think the blue one might see play in the Esper Super Friends kind of decks. But outside of that, I don't see much play for other offs, although the white one could see play in the Esper tokens because it does play some planeswalkers and it doesn't mind getting those tokens and counters for planeswalkers, but this is still very shaky assumption. I do like Fall of the Titans for the red-green ramp. It's a Clash of Defiance kind of card. If you can, let's say, play some 2-mana ramp spell and then this, then for X and red, for the surge cost, you can deal X to head and X to a creature. The Warden is a bit tricky, but I think it's only one creature and one player, or two creatures or two players. I think that's the way it works. Anyway, it's a powerful card, and I think it will find its way into standard. Cards like Zendikar Resurgent, that's the 7-mana enchantment, probably won't see play in standard, but all the casual formats like Commander will be happy to see that card. Think of those mono green Omnoth kinds of decks. Overwhelming Denial is a card that I think will spike in price, because it seems like a very busted card for Modern, I think. For Twin decks, for Grixis decks, for Delver decks. Also, it's crazy because once you cast Exarch and it's on the stack, it doesn't matter if they try to do something about it. Like while it's on the stack, let's say they try to remand it or cast a Cryptic Command and counter it from the stack, you can already cast a Denial for the search cost. So basically you have this 2-mana uncounterable unconditional counter spell for 2 mana once you actually play something before this spell, which is huge, and I think this will help Twin quite a lot. And this kind of cards actually might hold off the bannings for the Amulet Bloom deck in Modern, even though I think cards from that deck, Amulets of Vigor or Summer Bloom, should be actually banned, because the deck is really messing up with Modern format right now. Not just while observing tournaments and deck lists everywhere worldwide, but according to my personal experience as well, running into the deck during the tournaments. It just becomes a very uninteractive game of Magic, even though you can still kill a Titan, but they still have Pact of Negation and so forth. Or they can find it again with a new Pact and try to punish you once again. Bonds of Mortality is just a sweet card for casual formats, and it's also a nice option if you really want to have a great tool against the Boggles deck. There you have it. In Modern, of course. In other formats, this card won't do a whole lot. Gift of Tusks could be a total boss, could be a pretty good card. Depends on how the metagame will shape up. It's an interesting card, but most likely it won't see constructed play, but you never know. Cards like this tend to do some weird things. Reckless Bushwhacker is a throwback to the Goblin Bushwhacker from the first Zendikar block, where it was a pretty big player in Standard. This one might be as well, and this might be the card that might keep alive Atarka Red in standard, despite all the cheap new sweepers or mass removal spells. Tears of Valkut is the card I mentioned just right now, a few moments ago at the beginning. So yeah, it's an instance for 1 in the red, can't be countered, 5 to a flyer. Probably will see some play, but I'm not sure if that's the card we really needed or missed in the meta game, because Rending Volley covered most of the corresponding bases. Inverter of Truth is a strange card, also either total miss or big hit, depending on what kind of decks you might put it in. Because of the fetchlands from Khan's block, it actually might be viable, but I'm not sure. I don't want to make big statements regarding this card, but I think it's definitely something to be aware of when you're building, and something that might actually spike in prices depending on the range of removals that will be heavily played in standard. Really like Immolating Glare, that's the 2-mana instant white, destroy target attacking creature. Right now there's a lot of removal that are gonna be pushing this away from seeing a lot of competitive play, but it's definitely a nice one to have around. Reprint of Negate is also sweet, but nothing super exciting. Bearer of Silence is the new iteration on creatures like Flashback Marauder. Basically, for 2 manas you got a 2/1 flying guy which can't block, but if you pay 4 mana, including 1 black and 1 colorless, you basically get a 2/1 flyer plus target opponent has to sacrifice a creature, not each player, which could be a big difference, and that could make this card very playable in standard. The sad part about it, the addict effect only happens when you cast this guy, which is, I think, the biggest downside of this card, because you can't get value out of it with Collected Company. Flashback Marauder is a card in standard and in those rally decks and aristocrats decks, just because you get the effect right off the gates once you flipped it from Collected Company. Cards like Flame Tendrils, that's the sorcery for 1 and 2 black. All creatures get -2/2 until end of turn and get exiled if they die this turn. It's one of the cards that will actually diminish the popularity of Attack Rat in standard and will make Swarm aggro or any fast aggro decks a very hard deck choice in the coming weeks. On the other hand, if lots of people will think that those decks are dead, then some players might actually grind some tournaments just because nobody would expect them to be around that much. I like Sifter of Skulls. I'm just not sure where does it fit right now. Probably not so much. There is another creature which is very similar to it. It's 4 mana 4/4 that basically snaps away a card from their hands forever, and when that creature dies they get to draw a card. I think that one is much better, and but this one might do something. The problem with it is that this particular creature on the screen right now in the middle, it costs 4 mana. If it will be 3 mana, then it will be insane. I think it will be pretty good for all the rally and aristocrat stacks. As it stands, it's like Catacomb Sifter is just better. Moving on, Expedite could be a potential sleeper with regard to Modern, or even perhaps Standard, but that's unlikely. I don't see a huge combo with it for Standard. But there could be something that I'm missing, which is off my radar right now for Modern. because there used to be those similar cards from, I think, Shadowmoor, which saw play in the Ascendancy combo deck. So maybe not right now, but maybe with Shadow over Innistrad, or with the set after it, Expedite might become a combo piece for some crazy deck. The card next to it, Pulse of Murasa, is something I really like. I really like this card. I can't stress this enough in any review material. 2 and a green, instant, return target creature lands from your graveyard to your hands. Or it could be actually from opposing graveyard to their hand, if you really want to. Could be a pretty weird card in multiplayer, but anyways, you gain 6 life, and you get a creature back to your hand. This is a pretty good deal, and getting a land also could be pretty sweet, especially if it's some utility lands. Even though it's not really close to the power level of Den Protector or Eternal Witness, I really like this card, and I think it will see play. I will be very disappointed if it wouldn't. I think it has a lot of potential. It's just a sweet value card. Basically, look at it this way. If it's better than something like a Divination in some decks, then it will be played in Standard at least. Moving on. New Dissipate, the Void Shatter will probably see play, if not now, then with the next sets after rotation. Cards like this are bound to actually be used, because Dissipate types of cards will actually do stuff. Right now, there is not so much that cares about graveyard. Exiling spells. Of course, there is Den Protector, Jace coming back from Mojutai's command, but still, that's not enough to actually make cards like Dissipate that relevant. But maybe with the next set, or depending on how the metagame shapes up. Kozilek's return is definitely a huge pickup for the red-green X Eldrazi ramp decks. It basically gives you a Volcanic Fallout sort of with an upside. Okay, it can be countered, unlike Volcanic Fallout. It's still better than just giving those decks a Pyroclasm reprint, for example. Because not only this is instant, when you play a big Eldrazi, you get to sweep the board once again and do it for 5 damage to each creature, which is ridiculous, I think. Once again, making fast aggro decks very dangerous deck choice. Really like the Eldrazi Obligator. That's the 2 in a red, 3/1 body. When you cast it, you can pay 2, one of which should be colorless. And then you basically have the threaten effect. You basically get to steal a creature and give it haste. I think this card will be a big thing in Standard just because of the rise of the Eldrazi decks. So you get to swing with their big spaghetti monster with something like an Olamog, for example, or with Dragonlord at Atarka, let's say. So mid-rangey decks with red would really love this card, and it will also be a huge card in the mirror matches between Eldrazi ramp decks. Also, this guy has haste, so you basically get to deal a bunch of damage with 5 mana out of nowhere if they just tap low or tap too many creatures. Thank goodness there are no Annihilator abilities on the new Eldrazi's. World Breaker, the card next to it's on your screen there for you. So 7 mana, which is a lot, but not for Eldrazi ramp decks. Think of it as a more flexible, more interesting and powerful Indrik Stumpholer from the old Ravnica, I think, and then it was reprinted somewhere else with a different name, I think. So you get a big buddy. You also can recur this multiple times against control decks, so you have this recurring threat which they have to exile pretty much. So basically one of the cards that might make the new Dissipate relevant in Standard. And then when you cast it, you get to exile artifact, enchantment, or land, and this guy also has reach. So I think this card will see a lot of play, but it's at an odd spot because there are not that many artifacts or enchantments that are super relevant, although there are things like Stasis Snare and Quarantine Field. So, but they're not super widely played right now in Standard, except for enchantment like Silk Wrap, which would exile your Hangerback Walker from your ramp deck, but that's not really that crazy. But it's definitely a very strong card, and it will probably see play in the sideboards of the ramp decks. Moving on. Ruin in their wake is tricky, so there is already Sylvan Shrine available for ramp decks, but there is so much incentive for the ramp decks now to play more colorless sources, so possibly this will replace some of the ramp spells in the Eldrazi decks. It's tricky. Probably people will try it, but I won't be surprised if some people will actually ditch this card. Or not play 4, maybe like 2 copies. Kozilek, of course, is bound to make some waves in Eldrazi decks. It does a lot of good stuff. Basically, once you resolve it, they would have hard time resolving all of the spells. Of course, you won't be able on average to counter everything, but most of the annoying stuff, I suppose. Also, it will be interesting how ramp decks will tweak their mana curve so that Kozilek gets to counter some of the key spells which are used to stop the Eldrazi deck. Endbringer is a very funny card, but outside of stuff like multiplayer, Highlander, I don't think it will see much constructed play. Yeah, Footnote Seer on the right is the one that I've been talking about today, and I really like this card. I don't know if it would see much play. I don't think Eldrazi decks would need a lot of disruption, at least the ramp variations, but in the mid-rangey kind of beatdown versions, maybe like black-white Eldrazi or red-green beatdown Eldrazi, this will probably be there. Matter Reshaper is something pretty crazy, or that I think will see play also in those mid-range beatdown Eldrazi decks, but you will definitely have to manipulate your builds a lot to get enough of value out of this guy. Probably there will be a lot of different possible flavors, ones that play Footnote Seer, ones they don't, ones that play the card next to this guy, Reality Smasher, the 5 mana 5/5 Trample Haze guy, which is actually hard to get rid of sometimes. It all depends. Perhaps there will be some hybrid builds, maybe even featuring the Eldrazi Mimic, although I doubt it. It reminds me a lot of the Mind Shrieker from the old Innistrad and that card didn't see much play. At first people tried it, but then quickly ditched it for something more stable. I definitely don't like the new so-called Eldrazi Charm, the Warping Veil. I don't think it does enough. In Limited it's a fine card, but I don't see it being great and constructed. I like the Spatial Contortion, of course. Cheap removal for all different Eldrazi decks. Sometimes it will be actually acting as a giant growth, providing some reach in a way, pumping your guy to deal the final amounts of damage. Speaking of Modern, I really like the Ali Eternal Pilgrim and Urian Rune Diver. Both cards I think should be tried out in Modern, and this black-white Core Cleric probably will be featured also in the Absent Aggro decks, replacing the Hero of the Wilds, because it does nearly the same, but you have a lot of other benefits on top of that. Of course it's a legendary creature, but you're playing 3 to 4 copies of Anafenza, which is a legendary creature as well, so you expect your stuff to actually die very quickly. And if it doesn't, you still have a bunch of other things to play. You're not really dumping your hand very quickly anyway. But in Modern, I would be trying out this creature in the Absent Company in the Malara combo deck as a value creature, maybe in the slot of one of the Wall of Fruits, or in the slot of one of the main deck Voice of Resurgency, something like that. The mana cost is pretty tough, but I don't think I would play more than one. Maybe it will turn out that I don't really need that creature in that deck, but I just wanna try it out and see how it goes. I've tried the Magic Origins Liliana Heretic Healer. It was okay sometimes very good, but it didn't fit into the deck. It was a great value card, just as Evolutionary Leap, but those cards do much more in Standard. In Modern, even in the deck where cards like Liliana and Leap felt like perfect fits, so in Absent Company, I had very mixed feelings. Modern right now is so much about tempo and combos. You don't have time to durdle around all that much. Maybe it will change after the bans and some combos will be fixed, and then we will go back to the times when Jund and Absent will be played a lot again, even though Jund right now is still played quite a bit, but not as much as it could when some of the unfair decks are fixed. Jury Ian is, I think, a good thing to try out in Modern Delver decks with Gitaxian Probes, Void Scours, and Pyromancers, Snapcasters, and things like that. On the other hand, for 3 mana, getting a 2/3 body which can be bolted, and sometimes throwing you an extra card, that might be too much actually. Because Modern is a very efficient format. Mina and Dan Wildborn is a card that I think it will be overhyped. I had high hopes for it, but in this form, I don't know like which decks actually want this. Giving trample to your giant spaghetti monsters is a fine thing to do, and actually it might be enough of a bonus to make it playable for ramp decks, but I think it will be mostly played in those mid-range beatdown Eldrazi decks rather than in the ramp versions. Really like the Storm Chaser Mage. I think in the Modern Delver decks, it actually could be much better than the legendary 2-3 I talked about a moment ago. It really fits quite nicely also into this funky Timor Prowess modern deck that I think Pat Chapin popularized a while back. It's really nice. It's not quite on the power level of Monastery Swiftspear, but it's still a pretty sweet card. Speaking of lands, I think the ones that are worth mentioning is Hisson Quagmire. It's the black-green animate land. 2/2 Death Touch Body is very good. I'm not sure how it fits into Standard. Obviously, first thing that comes into mind is Absent Aggro, and I definitely think they would change one of the black-white manlands into this one. Even though lifelink sometimes is relevant, but having a land that can trade with a giant monster from ramp decks, or trade with a say some of the big guys from control decks. For example, you can sometimes attack with it into opposing Dragon Lords, stuff like this. The other two manlands are very disappointing. I expected a lot more from them. Just compare the blue-red one to Raging Ravine and you would see what I mean. Same goes for the white-red one. Although you could sometimes make interesting sequences with this 2-1 double strike land. Just pump it with something like a Titan Strength. So I won't be surprised if somebody of the caliber of Sam Black would brew something insane with this land. Just have this manland, wait till opponent taps down low, and then just unleash a combo. Basically think around the lines of a Tarkarad, and just think that what kind of blowout you could do in a sort of mid-rangey, control-ish combo deck, whatever, that can provoke opponent to interact early, and once they close down the shields for doing something in response, you just unleash this might and unleash a combo out of nowhere. Of course, the Tarkarad decks have haste creatures, but I don't know. I think we could see something funny in Naya colors, so to adding white to the red-green combo aggro decks. Just I think there is a possibility for something very spicy. I really like Mirror Pool. I think it's a busted card which probably might even see play in some older formats. Probably not Legacy, because those decks that use colorless mana, they don't really run a lot of instants or sorceries. But it's a great land. I think it could do some really broken things and be a great utility land. So is the Seagate's Wreckage. I think this card will be quite insane in some decks. I think I would play one if I would be playing some ramp deck in Standard, and I think some Hate Bears kinds of deck in Modern might want one of those as well, because it might actually be worth replacing one of the Horizon canopies for this, because this essential will do the same thing. On the other hand, you gotta be careful because this land doesn't produce color mana. And of course, expeditions is a totally different story. I'm not gonna cover that. I'm just hoping that if I open an expedition, it won't be Core Haven, because I don't think the price for it is very high, and I don't think many people will want this. All other lands are pretty okay. Maybe Dust Bowl is not super crazy, but everything else is pretty sweet and useful and beautiful as well. Okay, thank you guys. Don't forget to check out the tax reviews and stay tuned for some discussions about this set with me and some of the members of the team Bobrew. We'll be going deeper into interactions and the impacts of the set. Perhaps that will come not this week, but maybe next week. Hopefully before the next SCG Open. But I think it will be interesting also to discuss the impact of the first tournaments with the set as well. Okay, until the next sale, goodbye.